Hey everybody, welcome to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and on behalf of Studio One Expert, I want to welcome you to the Beginner's Guide to Learning Presonus Studio One version 3. These short videos are intended to help the absolute beginner, whether you're coming from another DAW over to Presonus Studio One, or whether this is the first experience you've had with a digital audio workstation. I wanted to give you a bunch of videos that'll show you how to navigate Studio One, how to use the basic functions of Studio One, and how to get up and running fairly quickly with no fuss and no muss, and explain things in simple, easy layman's terms so everyone, even someone like myself, could understand it. So in this video today, we're going to take a walk through probably one of the more important screens inside of Studio One to kind of customize the look and the way Studio One behaves, and that is the Preferences window. So let's head over to our song page here. This is the song we've been working on throughout the series to this point. And to get to the Preferences page, the best way to do this is go up to the Studio One menu here in the top left-hand corner of the screen and click on Preferences. And you're going to get the Preferences dialog box. So we've looked at some of this already, but we're going to take a look at each one of these tabs and kind of what's involved here. Now, we're not going to demonstrate every single item and what it does and how to use it. I urge you to spend some time in here, but what you'll find is over time, as you use Studio One more and more, you'll find yourself coming back to the Preferences dialog box quite often to switch things up, to customize and really kind of personalize the way Studio One kind of looks and behaves. So first, we're going to start off here with the General tab. And over in the General tab, we have a few additional tabs here underneath. Okay, the first one being General, and there's a couple of things here. So when Studio One starts up, what would you like Studio One to do? I have it set to do nothing. It just starts and gets right to the start page. However, if you drop down this box, it will open the last song or project that you worked on. It'll open up a default song or project. Let's say if you have like a customized user template that you want it to always open automatically, you can have Studio One do that, or it can automatically create a new song when you open up Studio One. So that's pretty cool. So it can again help customize and speed up your workflow a little bit. I leave it on do nothing. This little thing I think is important here, check for updates. So every time Studio One starts, you can use the news feed, as we talked about in one of the earlier videos, to see if there's any updates. But Studio One will check automatically to make sure that you have the latest version. And if you do not have the latest version, on the start page, it will put a message at both the top above the Studio One logo and also at the bottom of the start page telling you that there's an update available. So I think that's really handy. That's pretty cool. And then depending on the language you like to use, there's a whole bunch of different languages that Studio One can be in. We're going to keep it on English. Okay. If we go over to the Appearance tab, this is something that's pretty neat that a lot of DAWs don't allow you to do. And Studio One didn't allow this until version 3, where you can change the look of the way the edit screen and the console view and the way everything kind of looks from a color scheme standpoint. And you can do a couple of different things. You can load a preset down here at the bottom, which will have a bunch of pre-canned presets that you can change the look and the feel of a Studio One. So for example, Blue Moon, you can see as I'm clicking through these behind the Preferences pane here, you can see things are changing to give you just a different color scheme. So there's a lot of presets here that you can go through under colors, and then there's a creative drop down here. You can make it look anywhere you want, or you can just click on the default, which is what I usually have it set at, and it goes back. Okay, you can do that. Once you find something that you like, you can store it as a preset, so you can have your own custom looks. So you may find that you want to have 2 or 3 different types of presets to change up the look every once in a while. And then on top of that, you can also, instead of using the presets, you can go over here and you can manually change things. Like so the hue shift, you can just take these sliders and slide it from left to right. You can change the look, the saturation you can change as well. Again, you can see the screen kind of behind this Preferences. You can see saturation. You can darken things up a little bit. You can the luminance you can change as well. So you can really get, nitty gritty picky depending on how you like your screen to look. And again, it's a small thing, I know, but it is very helpful. I feel anyway. And you like to, do that. So, and then you can also, that was in the background view, and now in the arrangement window, which is, the track area here. And I know it's hard to see. You could do the same thing. You can switch luminance. You can darken it up or you can brighten it up. If you want to have a white background, you can see it over here. In this area here, you can see where you have a white background. Some people like that. That's kind of like what Pro Tools looks like. Some people like the real dark background, kind of like the Logic background. And then you can also change the contrast of that as well if you want to see the grid lines a little bit more. If you turn the contrast all the way to the left, you don't get to see the grid behind it. If you turn it more to the right, you'll see the grid. Okay, so that is kind of the appearance. Next is keyboard shortcuts. And again, this is really cool. All DAWs have keyboard shortcuts, yes, and it kind of gives you a list of all the different shortcuts, and you could even search. Like if you wanted to search for, say, save, it'll tell you this is Command S if you're using a Mac, save as template, what it is. But what, and again, that's not unique to any DAW. But what I find is unique is down here in the right-hand corner, you see the keyboard map scheme. And right now it's set to Studio One shortcuts. But if you click on this little drop-down, you can see that if you're coming over, let's say from Cubase, you can change your shortcuts. I'm going to say no here. You can change your shortcuts to what Cubase's shortcuts are, or Logic, or Pro Tools. This is huge for Pro Tools users. A lot of guys I know, and I did this at first too, but then I switched back to Studio One and I just relearned the shortcuts. But let's say you've been a Cubase, a Logic, or a Pro Tools user for many, many years. You may find that you're so fast on the keyboard because you know all the shortcuts and you don't want to rememorize all the shortcuts for a new DAW. And to be honest with you, that's one of the main reasons why a lot of guys don't switch from another DAW, from like Pro Tools, for example. Yes, that seems like a small reason not to switch to go to a better DAW. But once their really workflow is so efficient, it's hard to get people to switch because they're so comfortable with things like shortcuts. So you can just choose the Pro Tools, and now all your shortcuts in Studio One will be just like they were in Pro Tools, which is very, 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 very cool. You can also customize and make your own shortcuts, which is really cool as well. So that's very powerful in Studio One. Okay, I leave mine on Studio One because I've learned Studio One shortcuts and now I'm so comfortable with them, I forget a lot of the Pro Tools shortcuts. But that's something to really consider. So if you don't know about that, that's a good thing to know. The next tab over is our network. And this will allow you to remote control apps to discover this as Studio One, this DAW. So what that means is, let's say on your iPad app, there are some iPad apps for Studio One, so you can control Studio One from an iPad. You want to make sure that this box is checked, and that will allow you to do that, or from an iPhone. And then last, to touch input. The touch input, if you have like a multi-touch type of a screen, like a Slate Raven or any other kind of touch screen, you want to make sure that you would check this, and that will help the experience of the touch screen. So this DAW was designed with the future in mind, using touch screens as opposed to mouse and keyboards, which is really cool. Okay, so that's all under the General tab. Over in the Locations tab, this is again where you're going to be able to store, where you're telling Studio One to save all your projects and where all your plugins are located, so on and so forth. So the first tab here, we have user data. So this is all the user data locations, including your songs, your projects, and your presets. And you can choose where you want it to be. You can see here, mine is set up for a RAID drive, songs 2016, but you can change this just by clicking on the box, and you can say, okay, every time I save a song or a project in Studio One, where do I want to save it to? So if I have mine out here on my external drive, I can put it anywhere I want. Here's my Studio One songs, and then I have all my songs broken down by year because I have lots of client projects, so I don't lump them into one folder. So inside of my Studio One songs directory, I've created folders by year. Okay, and you can also see there's a macro folder here, a presets, Studio One, and template. These are all directories that will automatically be set up for you, those last four here, when you install Studio One on your computer. But then I went ahead and I created some more folders by year. So 2016, that's the year that we're in. Here's all the projects I've been working on up to this point. So I can say from now on, anytime I save a song, it's going to go into this folder. Okay, so it just allows you to automatically create a place for where you want your projects and your songs and your presets to reside. Underneath that, we have something that is super important. And as much as I love Studio One, and I think it is the most stable DAW on the market, I truly believe that, every single DAW will crash from time to time. Some more than others. Some it has nothing to do with the DAWs itself. It just could be your computer, has a little a little hiccup in it. So something I highly recommend is that you check off the auto save, and I have it set for every 2 minutes. You can have it save at whatever intervals you want. So when, not if, when your DAW eventually crashes, you'll have all the work saved for the last in 2-minute intervals. And then this box under here is super important as well. Ask to copy external files when saving a song. This is not checked. Both of these boxes are unchecked as a default setting. You have to go in and check them. And what this external files box will do is, let's say you're importing into your song file, let's say a bunch of WAV files, so you're going to mix a song, okay? And you import all the WAV files. And let's say all those WAV files originally resided in a directory on your desktop, okay? If you don't check this box and you import all those WAV files into your song and you save it, okay, and then you close Studio One, you close the session for the day, and then let's say between the time that you closed it and the time you open it, you delete those WAV files off your desktop and you throw them into the trash because you think, well, I've already imported them into Studio One, so I don't need them any longer. They're just taking up hard drive space, so I can just delete them. Well, the next time that you open up Studio One, it's not going to find those WAV files because it's still looking to that directory that you had on your desktop. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. When you check off this box, what's going to happen is when you import those WAV files from your desktop, when you go to save Studio One, it's going to ask you, if you check this box, do you want to copy those files to the media directory? It doesn't say it here, but copy the files when saving a song. If you check the box, what's going to happen, it's going to make a duplicate of those WAV files and it's going to put it in the media folder, which is with the song file in your directory. So then you can go ahead and delete those WAV files off your desktop. And now the next time you open up Studio One, it's not looking to your desktop anymore. It's looking to the media folder, which is where Studio One looks to whenever you open up a session. All your audio files are stored in the media folder. If you don't check this box, those external files will not end up in the media folder. And therefore, if you delete those files, or even if you move them to a different location off your desktop, in the example that I'm talking about, Studio One won't be able to find them. Okay, so it's super, super important that you check this box and I think the autosave as well. Okay, so that's under user data. Under file types, here's all the different file types that'll be shown in the browser, and you can see it's every file type in the world that you can, we have AIF files, we have FLAC files, OGG files, MP3 files. I mean, here's all the different file types that we can use for audio, for documents, for presets, and for video files. Okay, not much you really need to do here. Sound sets, again, here's a location where all your sound sets are going to be. And what do I mean by sound sets? Any of your software instruments, where do they reside on your desktop? And right now mine are under this directory here. But again, this is where all my sound sets are installed to this location on my hard drive. Again, by clicking this box, you can see all my sound sets are here. This is all done when you install Studio One. It automatically puts it there. Presonus already does that. You don't need to worry about that. But if you were to move the sound sets to another location on your hard drive or to a different hard drive, let's say to free up some hard drive space for you, you'd want to change that location, okay? Instrument library, same thing. Where all your instruments reside, and here's where they reside on my system. And then finally, VST plugins, again, and it tells you where they're all located. And again, this is all done when you install Studio One. You really don't need to do anything. It defaults to a certain location on your hard drive, but if you choose to move it, you can. You just want to make sure that you're careful about where you move things to and make sure that you do it properly. And then you can check off this button. This comes defaulted checked, and I recommend that it does this. It'll scan at startup, which means it's going to scan all your plugins to make sure everything is in the locations that they're supposed to be. Because if you have a session that's already open with a bunch of plugins on them, if you move the location of the plugin itself, then Studio One's not going to recognize it. And you can add a location if you have plugins in different folders on different parts of your hard drive, or again, you can highlight and you can remove a location if you want to as well. Okay, we're just going to leave that alone. I'm not going to touch that. So those are the tabs under the locations icon. Now, audio setup we looked at before. This is what we looked at in a few videos ago when we set up our audio routing for our interface. That's under the audio I/O setup. At the top here, you have the audio device, and this is my interface, a Universal Audio Apollo. You can click the down arrow here, and this will show you any other audio devices that are hooked up to your computer that you wanted to switch between audio devices if you wanted to. The device block size, we talked a little bit about this in another video, but I'll talk about it quickly here without getting too technical, so I want to keep this simple and easy for the beginner. Depending on your audio interface will depend on how low and how high the numbers are going to be. Typically, it'll always be at 32 on every interface, but how high the sample rate is totally dependent on your audio interface. My general rule of thumb is, and you can see I have it set to 2048 samples. When you're in the mixing stage, after you've done all your recording and you're adding lots of plugins and VST instruments, you want to go as high as the sample rate that you have available to you. That's in order to free up enough CPU space on your computer to make your session run more efficiently, where you don't get all kinds of stalls and clicks and pops, okay? Why that all happens and the technical end behind that, you don't need to worry about. I'm not going to cover that here. Just know that as a general rule of thumb, when you're mixing and you're using plugins, you want to set it on the highest sample rate that you have available. When you're in the recording stage and you're recording stuff into your DAW, you want to set this somewhere around 256 to 128, or as high as you can go without experiencing any latency. Latency means, in simple terms, if you ever, say, strummed an acoustic guitar, you plug it into your interface, you play that guitar, and in your headphones, you may get a little bit of a delay from the time that you hit the guitar strings to the time you hear it back in the headphones, or by the time you hear it back through your studio monitors. That time difference is a delay, right? And it's called latency. So typically what happens is when you're recording, again, this is totally dependent on your interface, and it's totally dependent on the speed of your computer, how much memory you have, so on and so forth. So if you have, say, an older computer and you don't have a lot of memory in there, if you set this too high of a sample rate and you're playing that acoustic guitar in this example, you're going to get a higher latency, okay, which is almost impossible to perform to if you're playing the guitar and you're hearing it come back as a delay. So you can lower the sample size, and lowering the sample size will reduce the amount of latency. So for example, if I go to 32 samples, you can see down here the input latency goes to 8.07 milliseconds, and the output latency is 1.22 milliseconds. If I raise it, you can see that the input latency is now 99.50 milliseconds and the output is 46.94 milliseconds. So as you change it, the block size will change the input and the output latency. So when you're recording, you want to set this as low as you can without experiencing any latency. Typically, it's between 128 and 256. But if you have a super fast computer or something that's really new with a faster processor and a lot of RAM, you might be able to get up to 512 or 1024. Okay, so if the general rule of thumb is when you record, you're going to set it lower. When you mix, you want to set it higher. That'll keep your computer running efficiently, and it'll reduce the latency to almost none or none altogether. And you won't get any of those clicks and pops and stutters in the DAW, especially when you're mixing with lots of plugins. Okay, hope that makes sense. Process precision, I just leave it at 64-bit. You said it's 32-bit. If you have a 64-bit computer, keep it at 64-bit. I keep enable multi-core processing checked. Okay, and all this, use the amount of cores. This is how many cores I have on my computer. You can reduce the amount of cores that you want Studio One to use. I keep them all checked. And the input and output latency, again, has to do with the block size. Okay, so now under external devices, here is where if you have any external devices like MIDI controllers, or in my case, I have a fader port, which is a kind of a hardware channel strip that you can control manually. But let's say you're using a MIDI keyboard and you want to hook up a MIDI controller, this is where you would do it. You would come to the External Devices tab, and to add a MIDI controller is really simple, or any kind of hardware. If you don't see it in the list, if it doesn't automatically populate, you would go down here to add, and then depending on what you have, more times than not, you'll find it in the list here. This list is constantly growing. So for example, let's say I had an Akai MIDI controller and I had the MD-P16. I would click on that, and then I would go ahead and I would click OK, and it would automatically recognize it and it would start to work when I use a VST instrument. Okay, really simple to do. If it's not in my list, if let's say I have an older controller or something that's just not listed here, you could go up here. You can go, you can go to add. And let's see, you go to new keyboard. Let's say if it's not in the list, you could just go to new keyboard or new instrument or new control surface, depending on what you're hooking up. And you can go in here and you can type in the manufacturer, you can give it a name so it'll recognize it in the list, and then you can hit OK. You can come down here and you want to make sure that, let's say you plugged in, and I have nothing plugged in right now, but if I had, let's say, an Akai Q25 MIDI controller, which is one of their MIDI controllers. When I plug that into my computer, it's going to recognize it, and if I go to receive from, you're going to choose your MIDI controller that you plugged in, and then send to, you're going to choose the MIDI controller that you plugged in. You'll hit OK, and now your MIDI controller will be recognized, and you will have given it a name and a manufacturer name so you can recognize it in the list if you have multiple MIDI controllers or multiple MIDI devices. And then what will happen is it will show up in this list the next time you launch Studio One. Okay, hope that makes sense. So that's under the external devices tab. And then last but not least, the advanced tab. We have a few different things for editing here. So in the editing section, we can enable the crosshairs for the, we can enable crosshair cursor for tools, which means that you'll see a crosshair when you move the playhead or when you move your cursor around the edit screen. I might be able to demonstrate that here. You can see here as I move you can see my cursor over here. Oops. There we go. Has a crosshair on it. Locate when clicked in any empty space. That basically means that if the playhead is here, I can't do it with this pane open, but wherever you click in an empty space on the edit screen, the playhead will automatically move to that space. You can apply folder track colors to content. You can colorize the track controls. You can auto colorize tracks and layers, show the channel numbers in the tracks. I mean, again, all that is pretty self-explanatory. You could turn these on and off as you see fit for yourself. You can don't show the event names. So in other words, if every one of your tracks here, you can see at the top here, Baby, Talk, Blues, and G. If I check this, that will go away and I won't be able to see the names of the events if you want that. And then draw events in a translucent way so the grid will show through. So what that means is the events, you can see the grid lines behind the event. And this is really helpful if you're doing things with MIDI where you want to lock everything to a grid. You want to see the grid in the kind of the background. That's because the events are translucent. If you uncheck that, it's going to be more of a solid color. If I hit apply, you can see now that this event up here, I can't see the grid line in the background. Okay, I try to keep it translucent just because I want to be able to see the grid. Okay. Under automation, again, some more choices here. Automation follows the events. You can disable events under the automation envelopes. You can automatically create automation for track channels. You can automatically add envelopes for all touch parameters. Okay, and then you can default envelopes for audio tracks, volume, pan, and mute. Again, all self-explanatory. You can play around with these things. Under audio, again, we have some more choices here. We can enable play overlaps for new audio tracks. Okay, you can just read through these. I urge you to open up the screen and take a look through all of these, and you can see what I have checked off. And again, some of these come pre-checked as a default, some of them do not. So you want to go through this preferences painting. You want to mark, play around with this and get everything customized the way you want it. Then we have some MIDI things here as well that we can choose. Okay. And then our console, our mixer, we can colorize our channel strips. Solo follows selection. So in other words, when you click on a track in the mixer, it'll automatically enable the solo button. You can audio input follows selection, audio track monitoring follows record. So again, a lot of just, way to customize things. So as you're clicking around and using Studio One, you can have some of these things happen automatically to save yourself more clicks on the mouse and therefore speed up your workflow. And then last but not least, you have services, and you're going to get a message here that says changing these advanced settings might lead to improper function of Studio One. You should only continue if you know what you're doing. This is nice. So it'll make you go say, yes, I'll be careful, I promise. And when you click in here, there's more things that you can do to these things. But I don't recommend you do this unless, again, you really know what you're doing. I leave all mine at the default setting. I don't really need to come in here and do anything because you just don't want to screw up. Presonus has set this up in a way where you don't really have to go in and monkey with any of these things. But for some special advanced features, you might have to. But for this video, we're just going to leave those alone. But just be aware that that's what's there. So when you click on services, you're going to get that little message. Okay, so that is the preferences dialog box. Again, you're going to find that a lot of times when you want to change the way Studio One kind of behaves, you want to customize it, you're going to do it all from the preferences screen for the most part. So that's why I wanted to show you this in this video. Okay, so I hope that this video was helpful, and I hope you find that that the preferences dialog box is a little less confusing now. So join me in the next video when we'll take another look at some more basic functions of Studio One. And my name has been David Vignola with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. And again, for more tips, tricks, concepts, and training and techniques around everything home recording, be sure to head out to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. And also be sure to check back to StudioOneExpert.com, as that is really the one-stop shop for everything to do with PreSonus Studio One. Fantastic website. Go out to the website. We're constantly adding new content there to make your life and your experience with Studio One a pleasant one. So until the next video, this has been David Vignola with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care.